but growing up in my family, I always felt like an afterthought. I'm Sophie, 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my older brother Lucas was the star of the show. According to my parents, he could do no wrong. He got engaged at 25, landed a cushy job in finance, and by 28, was already a dad of 2. Basically, he ticked every box on the perfect son checklist. Meanwhile, I focused on my career, built up my savings, and stayed single, a choice my parents treated like a personal failure. They never missed a chance to remind me that I should settle down like Lucas. When are you bringing home a boyfriend, Sophie? Or, don't you want kids before it's too late? Were their go-to conversation starters. It didn't matter that I had a good job as a software developer, owned a condo in downtown Chicago, and was entirely self-sufficient. Without a husband and kids, in their eyes, I was somehow behind in life. Then, Lucas's seemingly perfect world fell apart. Turns out his wife had been having an affair for years. She finally left him 18 months ago, taking whatever money she could, and guess who Lucas leaned on for help? Me. I paid for his divorce attorney a steep price, and even covered several months of rent for him and my nephews Owen and Miles, while he figured things out. I love my nephews, who are 6 and 8, and none of this chaos is their fault. After the divorce, Lucas moved into a small apartment with the boys. I thought things were finally stabilizing, until I got a call from my mom last Thursday. Sophie, sweetheart, we have some wonderful news. Can you come by the house tonight? My mom sounded unusually giddy. What's going on? Did they track down Lucas's ex? Is she finally paying child support? I asked, assuming that was the only news big enough to merit an immediate family meeting. No, this is even better, she insisted. Just come as soon as you can. Lucas will be here too. I drove over after work, curious about whatever had them so excited. When I arrived, my parents and Lucas were sitting together in the living room, wearing matching, eager smiles. Dad was holding a folder. There she is, he exclaimed, jumping up to hug me before pressing the folder into my hands. Take a look at this, sweetheart. I flipped it open and saw paperwork labeled mortgage agreement across the top. I skimmed through a few pages, completely baffled. What is this? I asked, looking from Dad to Mom to Lucas. Mom clasped her hands together, eyes shining. It's for Lucas's new house. We emptied our savings and even dipped into our retirement fund for the down payment. I just stared at them, stunned, my pulse thudding in my ears. I had a sinking feeling this wonderful news wasn't over yet. Isn't it wonderful? Mom beamed at me. Oh, that's great news, I said, managing a genuine smile. A house would definitely be better for the boys than that cramped apartment. Congratulations, Lucas. Owen and Miles will love having a backyard to play in. I tried to hand the folder back to Mom, but she pushed it firmly toward me again. No, Sophie, these papers are for you now. I blinked at her. What do you mean, they're for me? Dad cleared his throat. Well, we've talked about this as a family, and we've decided you should be the one to pay for this mortgage. Silence swallowed the room. I stared at each of them, thinking this had to be some kind of bizarre joke, but their faces were stone serious. You? You want me to pay for Lucas's mortgage? I repeated, slowly, as if they might hear how insane it sounded. Mom nodded vigorously. We know you've been saving up a lot in your bank account. You've always been so careful. You could pay off a big chunk of the loan immediately, or just handle the monthly payments. Lucas can't possibly afford it right now, Dad added. He's a single father with 2 little boys to care for. I turned to Lucas, who was staring fixedly at the floor. You're okay with this? You expect me to pay for your house? Lucas finally looked up. His eyes were red, and his voice cracked as he said, After Emma left, I have nothing. They can't even find her for child support. The boys need a stable home. My mind was spinning. These aren't my problems, I said, my voice low but trembling. I've already helped you through the divorce. I paid for your lawyer. I covered 6 months of rent. I've been renting for years, never once asking anyone for help. But Sophie, Mom cut in quickly, we raised you for many years. Now it's time for you to give back. Give back? My voice rose, sharp with disbelief. For raising me? That was your job as parents. I don't owe you money for existing. Mom tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. Why did you even buy a house for Lucas if you knew he couldn't afford it? I demanded. Dad's expression hardened. Because we knew you'd pay for it. My breath caught in my throat. You have a great salary and no family of your own to support, Mom reasoned, her tone soft, almost pleading. The house has already been purchased, Sophie. Please, don't argue. You need to help your brother and your nephews. I shot to my feet, my hands shaking. No, absolutely not. I've been saving for my own house for 10 years. I'm not giving that money to anyone else. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table. This is insane. I'm leaving. As I stormed out, I heard Lucas begin to sob and Mom calling my name desperately. But I didn't look back. I climbed into my car and drove off into the Chicago night, my thoughts swirling with every memory of how Lucas had always been the favored one. This was just the latest and most outrageous example. The irony was, the perfect life my parents had worshipped had crumbled, and somehow I was still expected to pay the price. Lucas's wife had walked out on him and the boys, but somehow that was suddenly my problem to solve. I drove back to my condo in a daze, my mind reeling. Was I overreacting? Maybe I was being too harsh. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My parents genuinely expected me to fork over my savings or tie myself to years of mortgage payments for a house that wasn't even mine. The audacity was breathtaking. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, poured myself a generous glass of red wine, and tried to steady my racing pulse. They'll come to their senses, I told myself. They'll call tomorrow, apologize, and admit how absurd this is. Several days crawled by with complete silence from my family. I started to think maybe they'd finally realized how unreasonable their demand was. I went back to my routine, commuting downtown to my tech job, logging long hours, trying to bury the entire mess in lines of code. But deep down, I should have known better. With my family, nothing is ever that simple. The first blow came on Tuesday evening, just as I was stirring pasta on the stove. My phone lit up with a call from my cousin Jenna. We'd never been especially close, friendly enough at holidays, but that was about it. Sophie, I just heard what happened, she blurted out, without even saying hello. I blinked, confused. Hey, Jenna, what's going on? I can't believe how selfish you're being, she shot back. My spoon clattered into the pot. Excuse me? Lucas needs help and you're just sitting on a pile of money? Those are your nephews, Sophie. Don't you care about them at all? I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to count to 10 before speaking. Jenna, you don't know the whole story. I know enough, she snapped. Lucas is struggling as a single dad and you won't lift a finger. That's pretty cold. I let out a short, bitter laugh. No, it's not. And for the record, I've already helped Lucas plenty. I paid his rent for 6 months. I paid for his entire divorce. That's different, Jenna insisted. This is a home for those boys. Don't you want them to have a yard? Stability? After hanging up on Jenna, it was like the floodgates burst open. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails from relatives I barely even spoke to. Uncle Mark, whom I hadn't seen in over 2 years, left a long voicemail scolding me for being ungrateful and saying I needed to step up for family. My cousin Elena texted that I was selfish for hoarding money while Lucas struggled. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. Lucas had always been the charming one, the social butterfly, the life of every party. I was the opposite, reserved, private, and more at home with a quiet night in than a crowded family barbecue. Lucas had clearly used his popularity to turn the extended family against me. And the most infuriating call came later that week, from my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister. Sophie, sweetheart, I'm just calling to talk some sense into you, said Aunt Linda, in that gentle yet condescending tone she'd perfected over the years. Aunt Linda, I don't want to discuss this. Just listen to me. You're not getting any younger. And who knows if you'll ever get married or have kids of your own. At least this way, you'd be contributing to Owen and Miles's future. They're the continuation of your family line. I was momentarily speechless. So because I'm single, I'm supposed to hand over my entire life savings to my brother? Oh, don't be dramatic, she scoffed. I'm just saying those boys are blood, and right now they need a home. Lucas can't do this alone. What about their mother? I shot back. Why isn't anyone hunting Emma down to pay child support instead of coming after me? That's different, and you know it, Aunt Linda huffed. Emma's gone, the boys need help now. After that call, I'd had enough. I went through my contacts and blocked every single relative who tried to guilt me into paying for Lucas's mortgage. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve access to my life. 2 blessedly peaceful months followed. I started to believe the worst was over, that my family had finally accepted my decision and moved on. I couldn't have been more wrong. On a chilly Thursday morning, an envelope arrived at my condo. I figured it was just another utility bill, but when I tore it open and read the first few lines, my entire body went cold. It was a notice informing me that my parents had filed a lawsuit against me. They were demanding $350,000, 0 cents, for expenses incurred during my upbringing. I read the document 3 times in disbelief. They were actually suing me for the cost of raising me, listing out things like food, medical care, family vacations, even emotional support during college applications. According to them, it was time for me to repay a portion of their investment. My hands shook as I dialed the number of the best attorney I could find. I barely got the words out as I explained the situation. She scheduled me for a meeting the very next day. They have absolutely no legal claim to your money, said Jennifer, my lawyer, after reviewing the paperwork. Parents are legally obligated to provide for their minor children. There's no law requiring repayment. Then why are they doing this? I asked, still reeling. It could be a pressure tactic, Jennifer said calmly. They might think you'll pay them just to avoid a public court battle, or they might genuinely believe they're entitled to compensation. Either way, we need to start gathering evidence to show how absurd this is. So I spent the next few weeks combing through every bank statement, every receipt, every piece of documentation I could find. I pulled together proof of every time I'd helped my parents or Lucas financially. The rent payments, the lawyer fees, even small amounts I'd sent them when they claimed they were short on bills. When my court date finally arrived, I was trembling inside. But I was ready. Jennifer had reassured me repeatedly that the case would almost certainly be thrown out, but I couldn't stop the knot of anxiety twisting in my chest. My family had always been experts at making me doubt myself. Walking into the courtroom felt utterly surreal. On one side sat my parents and Lucas, surrounded by a small army of aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd all shown up to support them. The only people sitting behind me were my grandparents, my mom's parents, ironically enough. They'd called me the week before, horrified when they learned about the lawsuit. "We're here for you, sweetheart," Grandma whispered, as she squeezed my hand gently while we found seats. "What your parents are doing is wrong." Blinked back sudden tears and gave them both a grateful nod. Whatever happened today, I knew I wasn't going to back down. The courtroom felt far too cold for a summer morning. Across the aisle, my parents sat rigidly upright, their faces locked into expressions of righteous indignation. Lucas kept his eyes lowered, though occasionally he glanced my way with a look that hovered somewhere between guilt and defiance. When proceedings began, my father rose to speak, his voice echoing off the polished wood panels. "Your Honor, we've dedicated our lives and significant financial resources to raising Sophie. We're only asking for a small fraction of what we've spent on her over the years." The judge, a man who looked to be in his 60s, with kind but piercing eyes, regarded my father coolly. "And specifically, what expenses did you cover for her education after she turned 18? My parents exchanged a nervous glance. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, our son Lucas had just gone through a rough divorce. We were helping him and the boys get settled, so our finances were focused there." "So you didn't contribute to the defendant's college education?" the judge pressed. My mother jumped in quickly. "No, but my mother, Sophie's grandmother, did. And since that's my mother, I think it's fair to say we had a hand in providing that support." My jaw nearly hit the table. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, my grandmother had helped pay for part of my college tuition, along with my partial scholarship, but my parents hadn't contributed a single dollar. Now they were trying to claim credit for Grandma's generosity. Jennifer stood up smoothly. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence demonstrating that Miss Michaels has been financially independent since the age of 18, and, in fact, has provided substantial financial support to both her parents and her brother. She handed the judge a stack of documents, my bank statements, neatly annotated. As you can see, Jennifer continued, Mrs. Michaels has transferred money to her parents on numerous occasions over the past decade, $500 here, $1,000 there, and sometimes as much as $2,000 when they claimed to be in financial distress. She flipped to another set of highlighted figures. In addition, we have documented proof that Ms. Michaels paid for her brother, Lucas's rent, for 6 months during his divorce proceedings, totaling $7,200. She also paid $5,500 directly to his divorce attorney. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I lifted my chin a little higher. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I might just win this fight. If you're as stunned as I was to see my own parents suing me for the cost of my childhood, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happened when the judge finally delivered his verdict, and how my family tried one last desperate move to break me. The judge turned a steady gaze on my parents. So the defendant wasn't receiving financial support from you, but rather providing it to you and her brother? My mother shifted in her seat, her voice thin. That money has nothing to do with this lawsuit. We're talking about the costs we incurred raising her. Mrs. Michaels, the judge said patiently, why exactly do you believe your daughter owes you $350,000? Mom hesitated and cast a glance toward Lucas before answering. We plan to use it to pay the mortgage on the house we purchased for our eldest son. A hush fell over the courtroom. Even some of the relatives who'd shown up to support my parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The judge turned to Lucas. So, Mr. Michaels, you believe your sister should pay your mortgage because... Lucas finally lifted his head, eyes weary. Sophie isn't married. She doesn't have kids. I'm raising Owen and Miles alone. Family should help family. The judge let out an incredulous little laugh. Mr. Michaels, I'm not married and I don't have children. Does that mean I should be financially responsible for my court clerk's mortgage or perhaps my bailiff's family expenses? Lucas's face turned crimson. That's different. She's my sister. And that creates a financial obligation? The judge pressed, his tone cool but edged with disbelief. We're family, my mother interjected. Family helps each other. Mrs. Michaels, the judge said, folding his hands on the bench, did you help your daughter financially after she turned 18? Like I said, Mom stammered, we were helping Lucas at that time. So you prioritized one child over the other? The judge's voice remained neutral, but the question landed like a hammer blow. For the next hour, the judge questioned my parents and Lucas with a calm persistence that left them squirming. Why did they believe I owed them money for raising me? Why did they think I should sacrifice my savings for Lucas's house? Why hadn't they considered whether Lucas could actually afford the mortgage before buying the house in the first place? Through it all, my grandparents sat behind me, silent sentinels of support. I could feel Grandma's eyes on me, steady and proud. I'd always been closer to them than to my parents, though I was only now beginning to fully understand why. At last, the judge announced he would deliberate and issue his decision in a week. As we filed out of the courtroom, my grandparents swept me into a hug. You were brilliant, sweetheart, Grandpa whispered into my hair. Don't lose a minute's sleep over this nonsense. The week that followed felt like the longest of my life. I tried to bear myself in work, but my mind kept drifting back to the courtroom, to the looks on my parents' faces, to Lucas's sense of entitlement. Had I been naive all these years about our relationship? Had I only imagined we'd ever been close? When we returned to court the following Thursday, the judge didn't waste a second. After reviewing the evidence in this case, he began, I find the plaintiff's claim against the defendant to be entirely without merit. He fixed my parents with a stern look. Mr. and Mrs. Michaels, the financial responsibility of parenthood does not entitle you to reimbursement once your child becomes an adult. In fact, the evidence demonstrates that Miss Sophie Michaels has already provided substantial financial support to both of you and to her brother. He paused, locking eyes with my parents. Frankly, the judge continued, his voice ringing through the quiet courtroom, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and deeply disappointing. This lawsuit is dismissed. A flood of relief washed over me. It was finally over. They couldn't force me to pay for Lucas's house, or demand that I reimburse them for the cost of raising me. As we left the courtroom, my grandparents pulled me into a tight hug. We're so proud of you for standing your ground, Grandma said, her voice thick with emotion. But my mother wasn't ready to let it go. She approached me, eyes blazing. You should be ashamed, she hissed, her voice trembling. You just celebrated your own family's defeat in court. Grandma turned on her daughter sharply. Elaine, that's enough. The court made the right decision. Accept it and move on. I drew in a deep breath and walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. The battle was over and I had won. Or so I thought. A week later, my grandparents called me. Sophie, honey, we need to tell you something, Grandma began, her voice tired. Your mother came to us yesterday. She asked us to give her her inheritance early, so they could pay off Lucas's mortgage. I sat down heavily, my energy suddenly drained. What? What did you say? I told her that we haven't decided who gets what in our will, Grandma replied firmly, and that everyone will find out after we're gone. My throat tightened. And then? She cried and begged us not to disinherit her, Grandma sighed. I told her that's our decision to make. Even after the lawsuit, even after the judge had ruled so decisively in my favor, my parents were still trying to find ways to funnel money into Lucas's house. Would it ever end? 6 months passed. With the lawsuit behind me and my family keeping a cautious distance, I was finally able to focus on the goal I'd been saving for all these years, my own home. I'd scraped together enough for a respectable down payment on a modest house in a quiet neighborhood on Chicago's north side, about 20 minutes from my downtown office. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. Signing those mortgage papers felt like the culmination of a decade of determination, sacrifice, and late nights. Moving in was both exhausting and exhilarating. My weekends were spent painting walls, hauling furniture, and gradually transforming each empty room into a space that reflected me. For the first time in my life, I felt entirely independent. This was my space, bought with my money, furnished to my taste, with no one hovering over me to criticize my choices. During that time, I barely heard from my parents or Lucas, which suited me just fine. My grandparents, though, visited often, bringing housewarming gifts and helping me hang curtains and plant flowers. They were my main connection to family news. One sunny Sunday, as we rocked gently on my new porch swing, Grandma said, Lucas moved back in with your parents. I blinked. Really? She nodded. He's renting out the house. He's using the rental income to cover the mortgage payments. Your mother's watching the boys while he works. At least they figured out a solution, I murmured, feeling a strange cocktail of relief and quiet vindication. Your parents still complain about you to anyone who'll listen, Grandma continued, giving my hand a gentle pat. They say you abandoned your brother in his time of need. I let out a tired sigh. Of course they do. Don't you worry about it, Grandma said firmly. I've been setting the record straight with the family. Some of them are starting to understand your side now. Your Aunt Carol even told your mother to stop bringing it up at family gatherings. It was a small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. At least some of my relatives were finally beginning to see things clearly. Life gradually settled into a peaceful rhythm. I focused on my job downtown, kept working on projects around my house, and even started dating a guy I'd met through work. The drama with my family began to feel like a distant, unpleasant memory. Then, almost exactly a year after the trial, I opened my email one morning and froze when I saw a message from my parents sitting in my inbox. My heart thudded as I clicked it open, unsure what fresh chaos might be waiting for me. Dear Sophie, it began. We've heard that you bought a house for yourself. Since you now have extra space, we think it would be best if Lucas and the boys moved in with you. It would be so much more convenient for them there. Let us know when they can move in. Love, Mom and Dad. I stared at the screen, utterly speechless. After everything that had happened, the demands, the lawsuit, the courtroom showdown, they were now suggesting that Lucas and my nephews should just move into my house, the very house I'd spent a decade saving for. The audacity was beyond comprehension. My fingers hovered over my keyboard for a long moment as I struggled to process it all. Finally, I began typing. I will not be hosting Lucas or the boys. If you contact me again with these kinds of demands, I will report the harassment to the police. Do not email me again. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. Then, with shaking hands, I blocked both of their email addresses, just as I'd blocked their phone numbers months earlier. That evening, I called my grandparents to tell them what had happened. I'm not surprised, Grandpa said dryly. They still don't understand boundaries. I told them I'd report them for harassment if they kept it up, I admitted, feeling a flicker of doubt. Was that too harsh? Not at all, Grandma replied firmly. You have every right to live your life in peace. I just don't understand why they keep pushing, I said. Haven't they learned anything from all this? Some people never learn, Grandma said with a sad shake of her head. Your mother has always favored Lucas ever since you were kids. It's not fair and it's not right. But that's how she is. We talked for a while longer, and by the time we hung up, I felt calmer. My grandparents had become my anchor through it all, the only family I could truly count on, when my parents and brother had proven unworthy of that title. These days, life is good. My house is coming together beautifully. I painted the kitchen a sunny shade of yellow, planted a little vegetable garden in the backyard, and even adopted a gray tabby cat who keeps me company on quiet evenings. My grandparents visit often, bringing fresh-baked pies or small gifts for the house, and I've grown close to several neighbors. I haven't spoken to my parents or Lucas since that final email, and honestly, I don't miss them. Sometimes I feel a twinge of sadness for the relationship we might have had in another life, a life where they respected my boundaries and treated me as an equal to Lucas. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Some family ties simply aren't worth preserving if they bring nothing but pain and manipulation. My grandparents tell me that Lucas is still living with my parents, still renting out his house to cover the mortgage. Apparently, my parents continue to complain about me to any relative who'll listen, though fewer and fewer seem willing these days. Grandma says people are tired of hearing the same story over and over again. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents and my brother. Maybe someday they'll realize how unfairly they treated me. Maybe they'll apologize and try to make things right. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not entirely closing that door, either. What I do know is that I'm happy in the life I've built for myself. A life that's mine alone, earned through hard work and perseverance, not through manipulating or using others. In the end, that's something to be proud of, no matter what my family thinks. So here I am, Sophie, 35, homeowner, cat mom, and survivor of family drama that could rival the wildest reality TV shows. Life goes on, and surprisingly enough, it's pretty good. If you've ever faced family pressure like mine, I'd love to hear your stories. Drop me a comment and let me know how you stood your ground, or offer me advice for staying strong. Remember, it's okay to protect your peace, even from family. Let's support each other in building lives we choose for ourselves, free from guilt and obligation. Thanks for being here with me. It means more than you know.